Combox. The game lives on. Welcome to the Wagon Wheel, the cricket podcast. We answer your questions on the game. And the best way of course, doing that is via finding us on Good Areas podcasts on Patreon, or you can just stick a, what do you call it? Super chat? Why have I forgot my words? Why have I forgotten everything? You can put a super chat in while we're recording live. I'm Jarrod Kimber. Big AVZ has come up with the first question, which is Tristan Stubbs' Wagon Wheel. You know, that's like that moment in movies where you say the line of the movie, like Back to the Future. He says, we're going to go back to the future. And then he says it another, anyway, doesn't matter. Tristan Stubbs' Wagon Wheel against spin in T20s, mostly down the ground. That seems quite unique. Any reason why? No, I don't think it's that unique. I would say Daryl Mitchell, before all the sweeps and the reverse sweeps, would have been like that. Kyron Pollard was like that. I think generally, there are players who have different sections in there, that they like to score in. I think with him, he prefers the straight hit. It could, a lot of these things quite often come down to very, very weird little things along the lines of, what was his backyard setup like? Where did he play cricket when he was a kid? Did he play in the nets more? Did he practice more in open spaces, right? Can he sweep? Can he cut? All these sorts of things. But yeah, it's not that unique. I would say he just feels most comfortable probably using his feet and hitting straight through the line, which again, I mean, I don't want to say it's common, but it is certainly something that we see with other players. So he's not alone there. Sinoy says, off-field controversies, nonsense comments in interviews, weird chairman, head coach, captain relationships, similar, you never know perception, and most of all, rating themselves higher than what the stats suggest. Is current England team the Team U version of Pakistan? Head coach, captain relationship. No, because things don't change enough. I think if you're truly going to Pakistan, you have to appoint someone for a job and then 2 weeks later rescind that offer. And pretend like, or in some cases, pretend like you never made it in the first place. So I don't think they have the change. I'm trying to think of what they're like. It's probably more like Sri Lanka, maybe, like one of those mad periods of Sri Lankan cricket. Although they probably wouldn't have had the rating themselves higher than what the stats suggest. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a very weird period of English cricket, and it really has been, since 2017, 2016? It's going on for a long time now of weirdness. Adityan says, World Cup wickets significantly harder to bat on the bilateral wickets and feels more suited to Kohli, Smith, Azam type batters. Is there a point to be made for playing the anchor heavy type of cricket between World Cups so that you have a team that can chase 160 on any kind of wicket? Instead, always try to attack with the ball instead of the modern attacking batting teams. Well, I think some of that helps if you've got a team that can attack with the ball. The thing is that Babar Azam worked perfectly when Pakistan had a great bowling attack, right? And you can make the argument that someone like Virat Kohli, even before his modern revolution, would actually work quite well in a bowling attack with, Chakravarti and Bumrah and everyone else, right? Like, so I think there are, you can certainly make that. But if you don't have that team, Steve Smith for Australia in this tournament would have been more use if he knocked the ball around for 10 or 15 balls and then played like the new Steve Smith than he would have been playing like the old Steve Smith. And the reason being is that they needed it above par. So you still need to score above par. But my bigger point with this, and why I've talked about this with Babar Azam specifically before, is that when you get down to the end of the tournament and the very best bowlers are delivering against you, whether it's a bowling wicket or a batting wicket, doesn't really matter at that point. When the very best bowlers, and you suddenly have this great attack, right, coming up against you. So you look at someone like New Zealand, where they have like a bunch of overseas IPL players as their bowling attack. And it's not even the best bowling attack, but I'm just picking it as a random one that you might have to go up against in a semi-final. When you get to that level, you need your most talented batters. And I think that is still matters. But what you really want to be able to do, and this is the thing that is missing, is that Kohli, Smith, and Azam should be players who can play within gears. They should be players who can bat faster when they have to bat faster. They should be players who can bat slower when they have to bat slower. No one's asking any of those three guys to bat like Abhishek Sharma, right? What we are saying is that if you play at the same pace on every single wicket, that doesn't make any sense. James says England and Australia went in this World Cup with anchors down at 6 and 7 in Curran and Renshaw, plus Baba now batting at 4 for Pakistan. Is that just an artifact of the player pools or a new strategy on how to use anchors to rebuild? No, I think in Curran's case, so these are 3 different cases. It's a really good question, James. Curran's case, what you were looking at there is that Curran they're trying to work out how to fit his batting in. And the problem with Curran is he doesn't really have a natural spot in a top level batting lineup, right? And so they're just kind of using him. And if they lose wickets early, they can use him as an anchor. And if not, he has enough power that it's not horrible when he comes in at the end. Renshaw is being used for spin specifically, and if he doesn't need to come in against spin, that they will float him further down the order. Very clever. They don't have that many great players of spin. He's obviously one of the better ones. And Baba was also in there for the fact that I think they were playing in Sri Lanka. They expected more spin. So 3 very different tools and how you use them. So some of it is about spin and some of it is about how you use all-rounders and the flexibility that you get from them. Abe says, here's a silly what if. Suppose T20 cricket historically preceded Test cricket, but we eventually got some version of both. What would be different about the modern game in how it's played and perceived? For example, I suspect a lot of what we call proper cricket is simply an accident of Tests coming first. Yeah, I don't... Look, I've said this before. This really upsets a lot of Test fans, especially because I'm the guy who made the movie about, Test cricket. And this does upset a lot of those guys when I say... For me, there is no proper cricket. All cricket is proper cricket. Backyard cricket is proper cricket. Gully cricket, street cricket, indoor cricket. They're all proper cricket, right? And we should be celebrating all the different forms of cricket because not all sports have this many different ways that you can play, right? Like I love street basketball and I love NBA basketball and I love European basketball. They're all different. I don't understand why I would be in a situation where I would have to pick the one that I want to pick, right? NBA is proper basketball. It's not really, is it? European is proper basketball. In a way, it's more pure, but I'm not sure it's proper, right? Street basketball to me feels almost the most natural because just a bunch of people can go out on a court and play. And so I've never been a big proper cricket person. I think if T20 cricket comes first, it's very hard to justify Test cricket. You go back to the beginning and they were saying... I don't know if it happens before the 1850s. I'm not as much of an expert before the 1850s. But between the 1860s and really from the 1860s onwards, people were saying that multi-day cricket would never work because people had to do jobs, right? And here we are, right? 160 odd years later. It's still working. I think in England they had 3-day cricket and they couldn't believe that Australia would have, 5-day cricket and unlimited cricket, right? Like we've always been in a situation where we are kind of saying that it wouldn't work and here it is. But I think if you start with the major financial cricket being a short form game, I wonder if those conversations just kind of win out because you're making money in another direction. So I don't know if Test cricket actually makes it in that situation. It's a fascinating question, though. Abe? Ali says, can Indian broadcaster Jio alone fuel the growth of ICC revenue? Since Disney is gone, wouldn't Jio not underbid and actually decrease the revenues available to all current members of the ICC? Who else can bid to keep the price of ICC broadcasting even higher now? Well, I mean, what's happened in this last one, Ali, is that Jio basically overbid, right? So generally... The conversations that I've had is that people like Amazon, Disney, I suppose Netflix. I don't know if Netflix have made an actual offer. I'd have to go back and check my notes. But those sorts of other broadcasters, right? They usually build pretty close to what the rights are worth. And then generally what has happened is an Indian broadcaster has come above that so far, right? That's the bit that might disappear. Because if you only have Jio and, now Star and Disney are all together and, there's all these other, different situations coming ahead. That's always a chance. And I think we've seen that the best example of that in cricket, well, there's actually 3 really good ones off the top of my head. It would be England, South Africa, and New Zealand, where the TV deals are actually quite stagnant because there isn't another company that can really prop them up. Right, that can bid against them, And like the ECB probably got a bit lazy with Sky over the years, and Sky probably taken advantage of them at times. But also, that's what a business does. And to be fair, the ECB were always. I think the ECB made one bad deal when everyone in sport knew that TNT/BT were going to come massively into sport, and for some reason they signed an early deal with Sky when they didn't need to. They like re-upped with them, which I think for a lot of us was like, I think I've written about it at the time of like, that didn't make sense. If you look at New Zealand, you've got like one broadcaster. If you look at South Africa, you've got one broadcaster. You get a bit stuck in those situations, and it is a bit of a pain. And I feel bad for those places because they could make more money. We might get that off the ICC as well. But you've got to remember with something like the ICC, because it's a global thing, there could just be a random player who comes from nowhere. These things are very, very malleable and they change very quickly. Chris says, can you explain to a club cricketer the quote from Shane Warne who said, I bowl aggressively with a defensive field and defensively with aggressive field? Bonus points if you can explain a field placement to me as a right arm offie. Yeah, so what Warne is basically saying is when he is trying to bowl for wickets, he is more likely to have fielders out in a position to save runs. Because if he's bowling aggressively, what he's doing in that situation is he knows he's not going to be bowling he's not going to be bowling tight, so he's going to bowl loose balls. So when that ball is wrong, he might have. I didn't bowl with a deep point very often, but let's say he's in a situation where he's really trying to rip it, and he's got a deep backward square, and he's got a deep mid wicket, and he's got a deep point. He can now go for a maximum amount of spin and know that if he drops short because of the amount of revolutions he puts on the ball, sometimes he's just going to drop short. He's not going to get punished for that, right? And the opposite as well. If he wanted to bowl fuller, obviously he would have the fielders back straight. But because he has those fielders out, he can put so much revolutions on the ball, right, that he can't really be punished, if that makes sense. So he's putting so many revolutions on the ball, he's more likely to get a wicket, but then he won't get punished for the mistakes. If he's bowling with a defensive field, if he's bowling with an attacking field, so he's got, let's say, a slip, a silly point, a short leg, maybe like a catching cover for him occasionally, right behind the silly point as well, maybe even a second slip, right? So he's got 4 catching fielders in. He can't take big chances because there are gaps everywhere else on the field. So when he has that field out there, what he's really doing at that stage is he's just putting the ball on the spot, right? And he's not putting maximum revolutions on it, but he's making sure that there's enough revolutions to keep the batter honest. And then if the batter makes a slight mistake, he's got all these catches around to be able to take it, right? So that's kind of what he's explaining there. As far as an off spinner would go, like if you're an off spinner and you're really, really accurate, right? You can probably bowl with, like, I would go right arm around the wicket. I would have a slip. If I've got someone who props forward, I would have a short leg. If I spin or bounce it, I would have a leg slip in place. But then I would have still the ring of fielders out on the leg side in that position. And if I'm really, really accurate and I'm not going to bowl a bad ball, I don't need like long on mid wicket and deep backward square out. I can bring that other fielder in and put them at mid wicket to put extra pressure on, so that when I'm bowling that middle stump line and spinning it back in, they struggle to get off strike, right? And that's the defensive thing with the attacking field. So I have the ability to be able to have 3 catches in place for them, or at least 2 catches in place for those positions, but also keep them on strike by not bowling many bad balls and having that fielder up. Whereas if I'm going for the big dream ball and I'm bowling over the wicket as an off spinner and trying to spin the ball back into off stump, that big sort of, beautiful Graham Swan, Moeen Ali type off spinner, then I probably want a deep point out or a deep cover out, right? Because I actually am going to be bowling a lot of floaty off spinners outside the stump. So I hope that makes sense. Reese says, did you see much in Bumble's idea of Phil Salt playing Test cricket, or is that just tribalism? No, I think I did this ages ago. I still believe that Phil Salt and Liam Livingstone probably should have been playing a little bit more It should have been pushed towards that. I think Livingston was the one I saw more. I think with Salt, I don't even know how often he's played first class cricket. He stops playing first class cricket consistently. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's probably a while back to 2016. So a lot of his numbers probably suggest. I think he averages 32. I think in Test cricket, you could stretch that to around 33, 34, at a strike rate of 100, 110. But then his wicket keeping has to be good enough, right? And I think my question for Bumble would be, do you think his wicket keeping is good enough? Because I don't think he can average over 40 in Test cricket, right? I mean, almost no one in England can. But even over 35, I think, would be a huge push for him. So then you have to back his wicket keeping. And I'm not sure his wicket keeping is strong enough for Test cricket. I mean, I'm not sure most people are. Ben says, if we remove the speedo in Test cricket, would the overall quality of bowling go up? Yes. There's a great podcast I did with Alex Tudor a while back. I think it's called The Tyranny of the Speed Gun, Ben. It's worth having a look at that. I remember when Jofra bowled that incredible spell at the Oval, at Lords, and then the next Test match bowled at Leeds and took like 6 for, and everyone's like, look how slow he is. I'm like, he's taking wickets. Isn't this the job? Cam says, it was the discussion point in 2024 as well, but surely the outcome of this World Cup with all the undefeated sides in the same group as Super 8 shows how ridiculous pre-seeding is. What a bloody stupid sport we have, or should I say administrators? Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about this, Cam, because I've been talking about this sort of nonsense now for 19 years, right? And I don't know if cricket just doesn't care or if we just are never going to get there, but there's absolutely no doubt that there is no reason to be. There's no reason for cricket to be as poorly run as it is, and yet here we are. Crate says, do you think Australia made a mistake by not giving priority to T20s as the format of the future? I don't know. The Big Bash was one of the earlier serious leagues, wasn't it? So I don't know that that's the case, that they didn't give it priority. I think it's also about players. I know a lot of the Australian players, like you've got, guys like Green and there's probably been some others, Andrew Ty, who are like, specialists in T20 cricket, maybe someone like Ben Dunk. So I think Australia was just really good in the other formats as well. I don't think you can really control what people want to do. And I think that there was a generation of players. Like if you look at that Australian team at the moment, it's a really old team. Most of those guys started playing cricket when T20 cricket really wasn't a thing. That's not going to be the case for every single team, right? And so the England team has a huge advantage over that because T20 cricket was around from, like, in some cases, like, since they were born. Those guys, there's been T20 cricket. And Australia doesn't really have that, and it doesn't become serious until 2011, 2012, really, as a global sort of thing. The 2012 World Cup is kind of the first T20 World Cup, in my eyes, where all the teams are kind of taking it quite seriously. That's only 14 years ago, right? So I don't think it's like Australia made a mistake by not giving it priority. But Australia are quite late at adapting to things in general. If you look at the Champions Trophy, that was definitely another thing where Australia just refused to take it seriously longer than anyone else did. It's part of our culture, Crates. Cricket fans are smarter than ever before. But what they're offered is clickbait, lazy punditry, and SEO noise. Combox is for people who actually love the game. Smarter analysis, real conversations. Combox, the game lives on. Jarrod Kimber here on the Wagon Wheel. Ajit says, I find it very ironic that football is a team sport and no one really cares about who wins player of the match. But there are intense debates about the bigger individual awards like the Ballon d'Or and FIFA Golden Ball. On the other hand, cricket is more individualistic, but people barely discuss much about the Garfield Sobers Award or anything like that. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, again, I'm probably not a great one to answer this because I think if you went back and asked me who the player of the match was in every single game I've ever covered, I'd know about 2% of them. It's not something I ever look at. I've never voted on one of these awards. Maybe I'd find it differently. But yeah, I don't really get it. and I never have. I've never been all that interested in it, unless it's like a plot point for some reason. I think the sort of coverage that we're doing at Good Areas and Combox as well is probably a little bit more pushing towards that side, Ajit, of hopefully trying to get people to, we looked at the MVP, which is a version of this, and we really have started to look at these sorts of things. But for whatever reason, it hasn't been part of cricket culture. But I don't know if I have a great answer to why that is the case. Person says, do you think the World Cups will ever move to a system to allow reserve days for earlier rounds? Even one day between group stages and Super 8s, and one day between Super 8s and knockouts would go a long ways. It just feels weird to me to have Super 8s match not held. I think we had reserve days, didn't we, early on? It's such a carnival and a circus now, putting these things together, person, that I don't know if we'll ever see that again. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I would probably say that having a 3-match final is a much better idea than having reserve days. I think that if the idea is to get the best team to win the tournament, I think a 3-day final probably helps you do that more than a reserve day. And I don't think we're getting a 3-day finals either. So not 3-day finals, as in 3 finals. Also, I just think it would be an awesome week for cricket. Person says, you mentioned in a recent video that there are many people of authority saying Nepal having a breakthrough season could give them test status and bilaterals. What would it take for Netherlands, Scotland, USA to get the same treatment? Is cricket just viewed as more commercially lucrative in Nepal? So these people spoke to you with them having as more opportunity. No, so Scotland's a weird one because people in cricket do kind of want Scotland to be, like, Scotland has a lot of players. So there are a lot of people who actually play cricket in Scotland, which isn't the case in some of these other countries, right? So I think with Scotland, they made it, this is when I was working for them, and even since, I don't think they've made it, they've made a case for themselves to play Test cricket, right? Now, they might say, well, we just tried to do what Ireland did and win a bunch of games at World Cups and set ourselves up. But I'm not sure they have. Nepal is a country that is, I don't think it's about being financially lucrative, because if it was financially lucrative, USA would be the one who would get test status, right? But I think in Nepal's case, you get massive crowds to games. There is a community there. It's one of the major sports in the country. And that the talent of the players is very high, outside of even the top 20 players, say, right? And I think the issue that Scotland and Netherlands have had is that there is a feeling that outside that top 15 or 20 players, the talent isn't there. Now, both of those countries are improving over time. Sometimes it's hard to see because associates are getting so much better in general. But I do think that is one of the issues. They don't really want a situation a little bit like what happened with Ireland, where Ireland gets test status and everyone retires from that generation and there's no one to replace them. I think with Nepal, it's younger players. There's more of them. So I think that's the thing. I think USA could easily be in that conversation as well. It's just that USA cricket is, unlike everything else in America at the moment, an absolute basket case, right? I think that's the biggest issues there. Ubik says, I know that the Don used to play squash, and as a squash player myself, do you have any squash-related cricket anecdotes or cricket-related squash anecdotes? I think, was there a Test cricketer, Ken Muleman, played like 1 or 2 tests in, and his Scott Muleman played for Western Australia. I've got a feeling he had something to do with Australian squash, or maybe maybe he just ran a squash center. I can't remember. I'm just Googling it now, and I can't see anything with Ken Muleman squash. Trying to think of anyone else. I know there are squash courts at some of the grounds, aren't there? I thought it was Ken Muleman. Maybe I'm confusing him with another one-test player. Obviously, the greatest squash story is probably the half a squash ball in Adam Gilchrist's glove, I suppose. Maybe that's where I'm getting the Muleman story wrong with Adam Gilchrist. I think that had something to do with the Muleman family as well. But yeah, sometimes Gilchrist would bat with like a squash ball in his hand to stop his bottom hand being too strong on the bat. And there are squash courts at grounds all around the world. So when you do a press conference, in England. So when you do a press conference in Trent Bridge, quite often those press conferences are in the squash courts, and they smell like squash courts. And if you're Ubik, if you're a squash player, and I briefly was myself, I think you know what I mean. It's a very sweaty sport. Aravind says, in the India-Pakistan game, when it was clear very early that there would be spin pretty much throughout the match, wouldn't it have been a good idea to send your spin bashers in, like Dubé or even Akshar up the order, maybe after the first wicket in the power play? They would have maximised the matchup, and maybe even the opposition would have blinked and brought pace back on. No, I think it makes sense. I suppose Gambier has his ideas, and that isn't really one of his. That was more a Rahul Dravid idea, wasn't it? Rahul Dravid liked that. And maybe Rahul Dravid's a better player of spin than Gambier, and so he sort of backs people who are good against spin. I don't know, but Rahul Dravid obviously used Akshar Patel up the order quite a bit. I think when he thought there was going to be spin, or when there was spin already being bowled. So yeah, you could have done that, Aravind. I think it probably makes sense. I mean, you don't want to be in a situation like, it's not like Sky can't play spin or Tilak can't play spin. So maybe they were just in a situation where thinking to themselves, what's the advantage here? Whereas perhaps if it was another side where it was more obvious, maybe a team like England, and you had someone at number 6 or number 7 or Renshaw maybe for Australia, it makes more sense. But perhaps when you've got other players who are also very good at spin, you just go roll with them. Mob says, why is it some batters who treat tests like T20s, Harry Brook, Colin de Grandhomme, Rishabh Pant, cannot replicate the same hitting appropriate format of the T20, actually have shit T20 numbers? And yet others like Jaiswal Sehwag could switch down their smashing game from test to T20. I think fielding placements do play a big part, Mob. I really do, because when you come out to bat in Test cricket, there is generally a freedom to your batting. It's very rare you're going to have 5 players out on the boundary when you first start. And so by the time you have 5 players out on the boundary, you're already in a rhythm. So it's very, very different. So yeah, I think that is a part of it. Some of it might be the white ball. And also the white ball is softer. So perhaps when you come in later and the white ball's a bit soft, that doesn't perhaps help people like Harry Brook and Colin de Grandhomme and Rishabh Pant as much as it might other players. I think Colin de Grandhomme's the weird one in that because he's a muscly guy, but generally the softer white ball, it's that sort of Lance Klusner, Kyron Pollard type of guy, right? You know, the MS Dhoni, you know, the big, strong guys who the softer ball doesn't bother them as much. Whereas generally the other guys end up all at the top of the order because it's easier for them to hit the hard ball with the field up. Hurt says, building on Nathan Jones' point that Zimbabwe's test experience last year has directly translated to a better tournament play now, it feels like we've lost the momentum we had last year for a tiered global system. Isn't that our best shot? What else can be done? So the whole thing about this, Hurts, you need to understand is that these boards, like the ICC doesn't actually meet that often. And it's very rare that sort of everyone goes to these meetings. So when the ICC does meet and everyone goes to these meetings, we get all this information. And then they don't spend that much time talking to each other for ages until the next meeting. And then it happens again until the next meeting. And it happens again. That's essentially why some of this is gone. But I just think that when it comes down to it, the same thing happened when we talked about tiers this time as it did last time. The teams who are on the fringe or the possibility of going to those other tiers don't want to. PJ says, does a teenager that grew up with the IPL generation, i.e. born after 2008, care more about the Indian national team, care more about the Indian national team or more for their home IPL franchise? Oh, definitely for the Indian national team. I mean, it's such an honor, and India is such a nationalistic country. And, you know, in movie theaters, people are standing up for the national anthem. And, you know, it's, you know, not all countries are like that, but India is certainly one of those that I don't think you can really compare the two. I've never heard of any. There are people who probably prefer playing for their franchise because they're looked after better, or they get more star treatment, or those sorts of things, which are very, very fair, or that's where their favorite coaches are. I think we're a long way away from anyone preferring to play for a franchise than their nation. That's the case kind of right across the board. We love the game, but we love the stories. Fans have stories. Former players have stories. Journalists have stories as well. Combox brings them all together. The game lives on. Oh, welcome back. Jarrod Kimber on Wagon Wheel here. Trying to get through these questions quickly because I got delayed and there's a game coming up. Can the IPL owners legally discriminate against Pakistan players in the 100? How would that go in UK courts? And how are they able to do so in South Africa and America without much noise? They've done it in all the leagues, if we're being honest, Ali. I don't know. To be honest, you'd have to look into the legal side of these things. It's much harder in sport, I would have thought, to prove this, and it might be in another job. But they don't write it down. I think I did this with TalkSport yesterday. As far as I'm aware, the only person who has written this down is someone from the ECB. I've been told this when I've worked for franchises before. Many other people have talked about this for a long period of time, Ali. I think it's much harder to prove if it doesn't have a paper trail, and it's a shadow ban, right? But yeah, legally, I don't know. I'm just not an expert in that, mate. Sorry. But yeah, it's been going on for quite some time. Hayden says, when a batter is dismissed off a front foot no ball, commentators will often suggest this is an important moment in the match and that the batter should have been out except for the no ball. How true is this? What effect does the change in length and shorter reaction time have on whether the batter should have been dismissed? I mean, it's probably marginal, right? It's because you're only, in some cases, you might be talking about 2 millimeters, Hayden. I think the more important thing is commentators will often say that was an effort ball and that's why he went over the line. Well, if it was an effort ball and he couldn't do that same thing without going over the line, I think then you have more of a case for what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, the extra couple of millimeters can help. There's no doubt about that. But you're not talking about, I think it's different if you've got like a 10 centimeter advantage or a 15 centimeter advantage. I think that, that's when you're getting into Boomer territory, right? Navin al-Haq territory where they're just delivering from closer than everyone else. So I don't think that is quite the case for this. But yeah, I certainly see what you mean. Sinoi says, is the Australian T20 World Cup win in 2021 the cricket equivalent of Aston Villa winning the Champions League in 1981? It makes no sense, gets head scratches at a pub quiz and will probably never happen again. No, I mean, I think Australia will. I'd be shocked if Australia never won a T20 tournament again. They're probably not going to win one anytime soon. I think there was a bit of fluke and a bit of arse in that, but sometimes you get a bit of fluke and a bit of arse when you win a tournament, right? Like, I think it was 2012 West Indies, where did they make the semifinals and there was a super over where they got like Marlon Samuels to bowl for them, right? Sometimes you just get through. I mean, Pakistan in 92, right? He's a perfect example of that. Australia in 99, right? Sometimes Australia in 99 was not Australia in 2007. Look at the difference. But Australia in 2007 is a machine, right? Even without Warne, it's an absolute killing machine. 99, they're like, they've got Brendan Julian. They're using Glenn McGrath at first change. Shane Warne is not sure of himself at the start of the tournament. They're not batting that aggressively. They're a weird side, right? So there was, and then they got the luck. They got the drop catch. They got the run out. They got all these things go their way after they were panicking just as much as South Africa were at the time, right? So, there's always a bit of luck in those in tournaments, and I think that's you could go through most teams. It's very rare that you just kind of cruise through, right? There are moments that sort of go your way. The sky catch, right, for India, it would have been really easy for him to just be a millimeter offline there and hit that rope. It's a very, very normal thing for that to have happened, right? Trent Bolt in 2019, I mean, look at England's win in that tournament. So I don't want to be, there might have been a higher fluke volume in the 2021, and obviously the dew played a big part and everything else. But But that team actually came together really well, if you think about it. And there was a lot of talent in that side. So, like, I think it would be unfair to say they didn't win the tournament with good cricket as well. And all of those teams, you know, generally at a world tournament, there's probably 1.5, 2, 2.5, maybe even 3 at times teams who are good enough to win a tournament. Sometimes you just need things to go your way. James says, what are the ICC thinking with their new nonsense skill scale graphics? We have a piece coming out on this tomorrow, James, so I don't want to go like massively into it. He says as he sits down to go massively into it, aware that the other games just started. But I like the idea, James. I love the idea of trying to reach new fans and really explain the concepts of like, this is why this guy's good. This is where this guy's not as good. This is what you can expect from this player. I think if you've been brought up under, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, or is Magic the Gathering? I've never played Magic the Gathering. I'm assuming it has similar kinds of things. But Dungeons and Dragons or any video game, you kind of know what this means, right? My sons instantly are like getting behind this. The issue is that the numbers are terrible. It's a terrible system that they've come up with. And also, the ICC should not be putting those kinds of judgments on players. So, you know, was it Max O'Dowd had a control percentage of, or control skill scale of 38? It's literally all Max O'Dowd does. Is it 38, 48, whatever it was? It's in the piece. David Miller coming in with 64. If you're in our group chat, James, you would have just seen me going nuts about this, being like, what are we talking about here? And so what they're trying to do is they've come up with a good idea, but it's a bad idea for a governing body to do this. Like if I'm Max O'Dowd or Matt Henry, or I'm just thinking of some of the ones that are bad, David Miller, I'm like, what the hell? Why are you judging me? You're the ICC. Nick off, right? Some of the metrics they're using are bad. They're using international and not using domestic. I could go on and on. That stuff is in the piece. So I think that's one of the reasons it's wrong. I actually love the idea of this, and it's something we've been working with. It's a great way of explaining players to casual fans so they get it. Because quite often someone will say, I don't understand why this guy's good. It's like, great, I can fix this. I can help you. I can show you why this guy is good. And in the piece, we've got one on Glenn McGrath, which I think explains why Glenn McGrath was as great as he was and where he had deficiencies. Like you can instantly look at that sort of graphic and get a bit of an idea. But yes, there are many issues with this, but I like the thinking. You should be, when you're making these broadcasts, be like, how do we better explain cricket to people? And this is a good step in the right direction. It's just that the numbers are wrong. And it's because they're taken from low sample sizes. It's because they're taken from international cricket only. And it's because they have no manual override. So, like, David Miller at his peak was probably, maybe an 88 to 90 power rating. And obviously, he's no longer at his peak at the moment, right? So you bring him down to like 75, and maybe the numbers tell you it should be 64, but you think to yourself, that doesn't make sense, because if he's in a situation where he needs to hit sixes, he still has the ability to hit sixes. He maybe doesn't play that role as much anymore. That's how you do it. But the problem is that works great if you're a video game company, but that's absolutely terrible if you are the governing body of cricket. Abe says, if you could bring one bowler from the pre-biomechanics era into a modern biomechanics lab, who would you choose, and what specific technical hypothesis would you be interested in testing? I would bring Bob Appleyard, who is the original Mustafizur Rahman, the first fast bowler who can also bowl spin, really. I mean, Sid Barnes would be the other one as well, but I think Bob Appleyard is from a later era, and I'd be really interested. And we know that with Bob Appleyard, he had the ability to put rotations on the ball that no one ever had before, but his body fell down. So is there a way of making it so that we could continue with his rotations without the effect on his body? Having like 1 year where he takes like 150 wickets in county cricket and then doesn't play the next year. Is there a way of not making that happen to him? Reese says, who were the first great left-handed and left armour, both spin and seam cricketers? First great left-handed batter, I think, is Clem Hill, unless I'm forgetting someone. So that's early 1900s. It takes a long time. There were left-handers before, so I'm talking more in Test cricket. I think Clem Hill is probably what we would associate with the first great modern left-handed batter, if that makes sense. not modern in any sense, but of the international era. I can't remember if there were any great English ones before that I'm misremembering. Um, and then it would have been the. I don't want to say it's the first great one because I can't remember as much with bowlers off the top of my head. But the player I would have thought is Wilfred Rhodes. So Wilfred Rhodes, I'm just trying to work out when he makes his debut. So he makes his debut in the late 1800s, doesn't he? Yeah, 1899. So about the same period that Clem Hill comes on. So 1899, he bowls left arm spin in Test cricket for 31 years. Takes 127 wickets at 27, while also averaging 30 with the bat. Just a fantastic cricketer. Just a very smart cricketer, I think. So I think he would be the first one. Obviously, Bill Vose would be the first left arm quick to take a lot of wickets, I think, in Test cricket. And the first left arm wrist spinner that we really notice is probably Chuck Fleetwood Smith, who doesn't have a great Test career, but certainly was, at the beginning of that. But yeah, it's a lot later. It takes a long time for left-handers and left-armers to take over. I haven't done as much on left-handed batting, but I've done a lot on left-handed bowling. Ben says, if managed differently by England, how good an all-format cricketer could Adil Rashid have been? At his best, he's probably a Test number 7 in the peak of his batting. And then you could have used his bowling to bowl at the tail where he's probably most suited in Test cricket. And he would have been fantastic. He still would have been good in the fourth innings against top order players and some third innings, and certainly in the subcontinent. Maybe not as much in India because he's maybe a little bit slow there, but everywhere else I think he would have been pretty good. I do think he was treated not the same way because of his ethnicity, race, background, however you want to frame it. When I first came over, I didn't understand why he wasn't playing for England when I moved to Australia, and when I moved to England. And I talked to people and they were like, his attitude isn't right. And I was just like, I remember they used to say he was a roller. And there was a pretty prominent former England player who called him a roller. And I said, you can't spin the ball that much if you're rolling it. So what they mean is he's more spinning it with his fingers than with his wrist. And I was like, he's spinning it massively. Rollers don't spin the ball massively. It doesn't even make any sense. I've written about this before. I think he played a great game, I want to say, at the Oval, where maybe he made 20 or 30 odd and took 2 for in an ODI. And was dropped like 2 games later. The treatment of Adil Rashid never made any sense to me. I'd have to go back through his numbers to be like how good he would have been in Test cricket. But yeah, I definitely don't. I don't think England got the most out of him. And now they're desperate to keep him around as long as possible. Cam says, maybe it's just me, but taking aside the captaincy, I still feel like Jess Jonassen would be a better left-arm spinning all-rounder in the team than Sophie Molyneux. Or at least Alana King. Well, Alana King's different, isn't she? Even that she's a wrist spinner and they probably want her. Yeah, I don't really know what's happened with Jess Jonassen. I probably need to beat the bushes around a little bit and, pick up some rocks and message some people. Because I'm a bit with you. Jess Jonassen just feels like she went from being the best bowler in the world to not being in their side. And I don't know if I've ever had that. It doesn't feel... I don't feel that there is a good enough reason based on what I've seen of that team for that to have happened. Ajit says, rank these legendary and iconic innings from World Cup finals. Ponting in 03, Gilchrist in 07, Head in 2023. I think we did it on a podcast recently. I don't know if it's out yet, Ajit, but I'm trying to remember my numbers. I had Ponting first, Head second, Gilchrist third. I hope. Or I've completely changed my own order. Mob says, coaches are judged by their trophies, but is there a case to create an evaluation equation for coaches? That is, trophies won minus players injured. Can we incentivize coaches not to kill their players? So the best way to do this, Mob, and we're not quite there yet, and I think they kind of do this in some American leagues, maybe basketball and baseball, which is before the season or before a series, like what is the expected wins that your team has? And did you overperform or underperform them? Uh, and I think that's a big part of how they work out the coach of the year in the NBA. That probably makes more sense than doing it any other way. But that isn't going to help what you're talking about because we'd still be in a situation where players won. To be honest, I don't actually. You say coaches are judged by their trophies. I mean, half the time we don't even know what their records are. And maybe just actually judging coaches better would be the next step. PJ says, is club cricket the only sport where, as an average amateur, you can occasionally play against a professional and sometimes full-fledged international in a proper match? This never happened to soccer, rugby, or one of the American sports. It does happen in basketball. They have, I forget what that league is, but there's like a pro-am sort of summary league where like you'll occasionally see like a fringe NBA player like Bones Highland score like 80 points and he'll be guarded by like a kid, right? So it actually does happen a little bit. Golf, as you've mentioned, is another one. Those are the two I can think of. Oh, there's also Australia has a sprinting race, and I don't think Australia's the only place that does this, but Australia has a sprinting race, which is pro-am, a couple of sprinting races, which are pro-am, where there's handicaps. And then obviously, so the pros turn up because if they can still win, they get big money, but everyone is handicapped. So that would be an amateur going up against a professional in those. Trying to think if there's anything else. Those are the ones off the top of my head probably make the most sense. Yeah, I wonder how often it will happen in cricket in the future, but yeah, traditionally it's still happening, right? And Hurt says, are there any interesting specific data points that ball by ball or say CricViz capture that remain highly exclusive to paying partners, teams, companies that are not public? Ignoring ball tracking. I mean, people like CricViz have, fielding would have fielding data that most people wouldn't have that you wouldn't get from ball by ball data. There's obviously video analysis that you would get. I'm trying to think of anything else. The thing is that Crick Sheets and Andrew Sampson's database and these sorts of people actually have a shitload of data, and it does actually cover a lot of different things. So yeah, I'd certainly say that those are pretty much there. But yeah, the fielding one is the one off the top of my head. If you're ignoring ball tracking, I'm trying to think of anything else we don't have, because I would have thought we have most other things. We have video, we have ball by ball. Oh, shot types. Yeah, shot types. So it's not shot types and ball and where the ball is landing. So not just ball tracking, but there are people who do that manually so that you can. There are companies that do that. So that one isn't there. And shot types. And you could also say ball types, but I've seen the manual ball type things. I think the CricViz one is, much more accurate in that kind of way. Whereas where the ball's bounced, it's actually, the Hawkeye people have told me this before, it's not that much different than when people manually do it. But where if the ball's moving, that is very different because of the angles. It's harder to see that. So yeah, shot types is probably the other one off the top of my head that I would say. All right, let's finish up our wagon wheel here. We've got a couple of super chats. Mahesh says, thoughts on replacing the toss? There was a suggestion I came across, run auction, where teams bid to add runs to opponent's score for the privilege of choosing. I kind of think for bilateral games, the opposition just chooses. I think that's the simplest and most elegant, but I don't know if we need a run auction. I have heard it before. I'm not against it, but it's maybe not quite for me. But yeah, I don't think we have to keep the toss. Rohit says, Greg Chappell recently said in 20 years, USA and Canada will be your top 5 cricketing power because of the Indian diaspora. Also, thoughts on EPL and European cricket. In 20 years, they'll be top 5 cricket power. No, I don't think so. I just don't know if the training facilities and everything. I mean, they could be. If cricket gets into colleges in America in the next 5 years, I think things could change really, really quickly. I think top 5 cricketing power is. I've heard this before. I remember these sports scientists came out with this thing that within 5 years, China could be the best cricket team in the world, and I was like, no, they couldn't. And these guys are really angry. And I said, I'm not having a go with your general understanding of China and sports science. I get why you were saying this. They would throw this much money into it. They would do this. But cricket is a game of inherited culture and knowledge, right? And it takes longer than you think to be good at it, right? Some of that has been changed by YouTube, and we've seen that with Afghanistan and their spinners, but not as much with their quicks, right? Same with Sandeep Lamachani. We're seeing random spinners from different parts of the world. We're still not seeing guys who come from non-traditional cricket backgrounds bowling at 85 to 90 miles an hour. And if you want to be a top 5 cricket power, that is what you have to do. Now, there's an element that Greg Chappell might be saying of these guys leaving their country and then becoming that, but they would have to be leaving their country at 16, 17, 18, I think, to be able to cheat that in the first generation. Second generation is very different. But conditions, administration, Canada cricket is very poorly run. American cricket is horrendously run. It's not in college sports in America. It's hard to play for large periods of time in Canada. I didn't read Greg Chappell's article, but a lot of people have sent it to me. I find that one hard to believe, but he's a baseball guy and he's always loved America and he always wanted cricket to be big in America. I think that's him projecting. There's no doubt they could be, but I find it very hard to believe in 20 years' time they're in the top 5 cricketing powers. I wonder if Germany is not a country that might be able to do that quicker than them, for instance, when you talk about thoughts on EPL and European cricket. So, look, I hope America, Canada, Nepal, Scotland, Netherlands, all these countries do start to push and to start to change, because can only mean good things for cricket, right? The more teams that play it, the more people who play it, the more interesting my job is, for sure. That's it for me, Jarrod Kimber here on the Wagon Wheel. Please like, subscribe, do all those things. And as always, tell your mum about us. We love the game, but we love the stories. Fans have stories. Former players have stories. Journalists have stories as well. Combox brings them all together. The game lives on.